You wouldn't be dead for quids with a view like this, would you? This is just one of the delightful beaches that are dotted all the way down the Fleurier. Welcome to Port Noarlunga. The beach, the jetty, and the reef going down, and then in the distance below the cliffs, the mouth of the Onkaparinga. They come together to make, understandably, a very popular holiday spot. And it's a tradition that goes way back. On days like this, it's easy to see why. It's all very relaxed. But local history buff Vanessa Catterall says in the early days there were grandiose visions of this place rivalling the likes of Port Adelaide, and it all centred on the Onkaparinga River.
They hoped that this river Onkaparinga would be like a highway. The boats would come and go, take cargo up to Adelaide or the rest of the state, across the Gulf. But there was cargo, and it did come down the river from Port Noarlunga, but they found that the mouth of the river here is too shallow.
But not to be beaten, they went to plan B. When the cargo of wheat, grain and wool came down the river, they'd offloaded onto a small horse-drawn tramway that they cut through the dunes to the original jetty, built in 1855. But that didn't last long either. One of our famous storms damaged the jetty beyond repair in 1914. So began the next chapter in the Port Noarlunga story. This one revolved around turning the place into a holiday maker's mecca.
The railway only went to Morphett Vale, so people came by horse and coach down here on holiday, and they built the holiday houses, and anybody who was anybody had a holiday house here. The Helpman family had a holiday house, the Dunstans, the original Dunstans.
Build a jetty and they will come, must have been the cry. So they did.
When the jetty was opened in 1921, I believe it was the then Premier of the state said that he would holiday down here. So because he said he would holiday down here, Port Noarlunga got its first telephone box because the Premier was coming, and that was that.
The town grew with holiday houses big and small.
This is Sowerbeer's house, which is currently owned by the local council. It's typical of a holiday house built in Port Noarlunga in the late 1800s. It was built about 1898 for George Sowerbeer, who was born in Happy Valley and came from a strong farming family.
Every self-respecting town needs an institute, of course. Port Noarlunga couldn't be declared a polling place without a suitable venue, could it?
In about 1914, a vigilance committee was formed to look after the growing needs of the town of Port Noarlunga. One of their first objectives was they wanted a public drinking fountain, a water trough for the horses, and better access to the beach. But they also had thoughts that they needed a meeting place and a library.
It became the hub of the town. Many a meeting and dance and deb ball were held in here. But the ocean and the reef, they're really still the stars, aren't they? There was a time when the jetty used to reach right out here over the reef, and that allowed hundreds and hundreds of people to spread out along it at low tide. But nature put a stop to that. A storm in 1987 chopped off the last 15 metres. To protect the reef, it's never been replaced. Further north, off Whitten Bluff, that's the headland separating Port Noarlunga and Christie's Beach, Table Rock was another popular landmark.
There was a big storm, probably in 1911 or 12, and it washed away Table Rock, which was a feature of this area. It was a large rock that had been separated from Whitten Bluff by sea erosion, perhaps water from the cliff, and it was quite a sightseeing attraction in those days, before 1911.
Today, the waves gently lap over all that remains of Table Rock. that's a poignant touch, but the beach and the Gulf and the reef, they're still here, and they've ever been the main attractions of Port Noarlunga. Maybe even for Captain Collett Barker, as the can says, he turned up 180 years ago, before European settlement, and before him, of course, the Ghana people. And over the ages, we've all come down here and found something special. Time for you to turn up and find it for yourself. Thanks to local historian Nita Martello for her books on Port Noarlunga, an endearing coastal town and a history in pictures. They're available from the Port Noarlunga Post Office and Shakespeare's Bookshop in Gawler Street. You can also drop into the City of Onkaparinga Library